Hey everybody, it's Atheist for the Cause, and Xexizy has a message to all Trump supporters. It's back from April 8th, 2017, but I just came across this channel not too long ago, going through some of his old videos. And let's do a video response because, I'm a huge Trump supporter. And, I'm an actual Trump supporter, not one of those people who likes Trump by default because he was the lesser evil, the lesser of two evils. No, I don't like Trump because I hated Hillary. I did hate Hillary, but I like Trump because I think Trump is actually a good candidate. So let's get into this video.
This is a message to all Trump supporters right now who feel lost, confused, or just betrayed in general.
Nope, I don't feel lost, betrayed, or anything like that. Trump's been doing a fantastic job, great job numbers. He still hasn't had a single month of lost jobs. So, and he went in and told NATO what's up, made NATO start backing up with what they promised financially. And then he went in with the TPP and got rid of that, which he promised to do. He went and he said he was going to get rid of NAFTA, but in the end, they were willing. Canada was willing to renegotiate it, so now we're in that stage of trying to renegotiate NAFTA. I have no problem if you want to renegotiate, rather than just completely take out these trade agreements. I have no problem with that. Trade agreements aren't evil inherently. It's just like some trade agreements help the United States and help the middle class within the United States or the working class, and some just help the businesses at the expense of the middle class. So in order for a healthy economy, we need to make sure that the middle class is protected. So long story short, I could go on and on and on about all of the different policy Trump has already come through on. It's a ridiculous amount.
I was going to talk about the general events that happened with Syria, but I feel like everything that could be said in it has been said. So I do want to talk about
Syria. Oh, are you talking about the Trump's single not serious attack? He just sent a message where the tomahawks he used were the lesser of the types of tomahawks he could have used, but they were also the cheaper ones. So he was basically just sending a message and not attempting to do real damage. I'll just put this out there now. For people who voted for Trump because they thought he was an isolationist, you're going to be really, really disappointed. Trump is not an isolationist in any manner. He believes in global trade deals, but he wants them to be negotiated in a way that helps the United States. And, he believes that the current trade deals, the way they're negotiated, aren't good for the United States. And there's some evidence of that to back that up. And, such as the trade deficit that we have with all these countries. Sometimes a trade deficit can be okay, but it's almost never good to have a half a $500 billion trade deficit with China, or was it $500 million? But it was a hell of a lot. And so we had trade deficits with almost every country. That's not good.
Is why this has happened with Trump, and
by the way, on military front too, he always said he was gonna bomb the hell out of ISIS, and he was willing to intervene across the globe when it's necessary, but he doesn't really want to, unnecessarily intervene. So, don't think that Trump's unwilling to go to war, but don't think he's a warmonger either. He's in that happy medium.
Alternatives to any Trump supporter that just don't feel they have any political ideology anymore. Now,
well, I don't know why someone's political ideology would simply go away because leaders aren't fulfilling what they thought. I mean, that's more on the leader than your ideology. Your ideology should be like the base philosophy that doesn't really change whether leaders carry it out properly or not.
Well, I may understand if some of you don't want another middle-class white boy telling you about how great socialism is, but
I don't care if you're poor, middle, or rich class. And I don't care if you're white, black, Hispanic, Latino, uh, Asian, Native American. I simply don't care what group you belong to, dude.
after the recent events, and after your god emperor has fallen from grace, I do feel like the least you could do is just listen to someone else. For a while now, the left has been pointing out how
Okay, so I should just listen to somebody else. Who should that somebody else be? You? I mean, why should that somebody else I just listen to, why should that be you over someone that's not you? Why shouldn't I listen to like someone who is even more capitalist than I am?
Trump has been going back on his promises, but you guys just said that was 3D chess. Then we pointed out how
You claim you pointed out that Trump went back on his promises, but he's not going back on his promises. I pointed out many ways that he hasn't. He's actually fulfilling his promises. I mean, if you want another one, jobs. I already said that he's been creating jobs, but right when he got in, he called some businesses and actually did save jobs. So it may not have been what people had hoped, but it sent a message on what his presidency was going to be about. Companies like Carrier, and then SoftBank came in and invested and claimed that Trump was a part of that, and there were all sorts of investments that these businesses were giving at least partial credit to Trump.
how he did drain the swamp, but just replaced it with what only could be described as even more corrupt. But
you know what's funny about this is that draining the swamp, he's saying that Trump drained the swamp, and there are actually a lot of ways in which this is where you could have a solid argument that Trump didn't. Like, he kept rents previous and things like that, but whatever. I don't really have a problem with what Trump has been doing with the whole swamp part. You know, I like a lot of what he's done with, and what his people have done with, going after child traffickers and things like that. So we'll see what happens. So draining the swamp is something that's going to take a long time. But here I see you're attacking Rex Tillerson. Now, the problem I have with this is just because someone was the CEO of ExxonMobil does not mean that they are corrupt and that they're not working on, on behalf of the American people. It doesn't. Here's the thing: if you want to get politicians out of these roles and get actual experts into these roles, what are the experts? They're going to be CEOs, and some of them are going to be, military people. But if you're going to, those are basically your three groups. You have CEOs, or, and then you have, like, military people. I should say businessmen, not just CEOs, but businessmen. You have military people, and then you have, like, your politicians. So if you don't have politicians, you need to fill those roles with your business people and your military people. But if you go all military, then people are going to say that you're basically, a military state, and that's not going to look good. Now, if you go with businessmen, there's basically no businessmen that you're going to accept, right? Because whether it's ExxonMobil or Goldman Sachs or whatever, all the top companies, you're going to say, see, he chose a Fortune 500 company, and this is just creating a bigger swamp. So there's basically no way Trump can win. And I would much rather you actually point to something Rex Tillerson has done that has been against the interest of the American people, rather than just saying, oh, Rex Tillerson ExxonMobil, automatic corruption.
You guys just said that was 11D chess. Now, the inexcusable has happened, and I guess...
I actually think Rex Tillerson has done a good job from what I know. I mean, there might be stuff that I don't know that he's doing, but he seems extremely competent, and when he talks, he's very convincing. We'll just say that.
You guys don't know what to do. You see, what you need to remember is that we are living under capitalism, and Trump is acting in the interest of capitalism.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
And of course he would do as a capitalist. You can call him...
Yeah, imagine that. In the system of capitalism, you want to make money and act as a capitalist.
Anti-establishment all you like, but at the end of the day, his class interests line up with the worst globalists you can imagine, because they are both at the end of the day in the same class.
But not everybody within the same class has the same interests. In fact, it's quite the opposite a lot of times. So say, there's two people in the working class, and they both want a job. They're in direct fucking competition with each other. Two CEOs, say, running, gas companies. They're in direct fucking competition with each other.
Things like intervening in other countries, imperialism for the sake of profit, these are inherent parts of capitalism. And Trump is, whether you like it or not, bound by capital. You see, because even if Trump...
Yeah, and our entire economic system is bound by capital. We want to make capital. We want to be a richer country. That allows us to buy things. That allows us to gain security. That allows us to put money into our military, put money into the public, put money into our roads. I mean, the richer we become, the greater the quality of the life for the people we'll have, and as in general as a country, the stronger nation we'll have.
Trump went into this with the noblest of intentions. That doesn't matter, because he's going into it, even as if he was someone anti-establishment, into the establishment.
He was anti-establishment, and he's going into the presidency, which inherently, the presidency isn't necessarily a part of the establishment if you get an outsider in, because first of all, the presidency is constantly changing, and it's constantly changing parties. So that's not really a good example of what the establishment is. The establishment is actually more of Congress, where people stay in Congress a really long time, like decades. And I actually attribute the establishment, when I talk about it, I'm talking mainly about like the RNC and the DNC, and the people that the RNC and DNC guides and controls, which is largely your politicians within Congress. So Trump is really guiding the RNC in a way, I would say. And Trump and the RNC disagree on a lot. And so Trump's basically reforming the old Republican establishment. And under Trump, the Democratic establishment is collapsing. Literally, like, there is a serious question about, in a few years, say within a decade, if the Democratic Party will even be around anymore. Or if it's the same type of Democratic Party. It might be taken over by the progressives, or the Democratic Party might just die and be recreated as like a progressive party, something like that. But they don't seem to be learning from their mistakes, so I think that they'll probably survive at some point. They'll probably hit a rock bottom and turn things around, but if the Democratic Party is going to die anytime, in my lifetime, it's probably going to be within a decade.
Working within the confines of the establishment, working within the confines of capital, and therefore he is bound by not only capital, but also the structure of the state apparatus. You see, Trump supporters, you need to get...
What do you mean but bound by capital? You mean he works within a capitalist system? That's not against um that's not against what I want, my desires. Capital is essential for achieving what my desires.
Get out of this idea that one great man can come along and change everything. Because at the end,
I don't think anybody really thinks that. I mean, sure, one great man can come in and lead other people to and change systems and things like that, but it's going to take a lot more than just Trump, especially just like one term of Trump. He'll have to get elected again, and it takes a lot of people behind him. The American public has to get behind him quite a bit and help him, not only him but help other Republicans or other pro-Trump leaders to back him. And say if the Democrats just took over Congress in the 2018 election midterms, then Trump probably would get impeached. It'd be a wrongful impeachment, but it would cause a lot of problems. So by having the Republicans in, then we're going to protect Trump.
At the end of the day, no matter what person it is, they are still, again, working within these structures. And therefore,
what's wrong with that? These structures are good. These structures overall have provided, the best societies in the world. Not just one or two, but like look at all of Western society. Unless you think it's all shit, which I would argue that Western society is the greatest society in the world. And they're all capitalist. And then you say, okay, if you don't like Western society, you want, say, Eastern society, like the Chinas of the world and Japans and South Koreas. What do most of these have? They have mainly went from communism to capitalism, and they have been their success has been growing under capitalism. I mean, Japan has a good history too, but they're under capitalism, they're doing just fine, and under China's doing far better under capitalism than they did under communism. So even I don't know where you want to look. Like, do you want to look at South America for where do you want to look for all these great socialist countries, or even non-capitalist countries that are achieving so much? The USSR?
Therefore, it is the system that must be changed instead of the people. Because no matter what Trump wanted to do, he would have always been forced to do exactly what has happened here. To take on the corrupt lobbyists, to intervene for economic interest. These are all things that no matter who it was involved would have to do this. Even Bernie Sanders would have probably had to come down to this. You see, this is why as the radical left, we don't propose just a different candidate, and neither should you.
You keep saying things like, come down to this. Come down to what? You're not being clear.
You shouldn't just wait around for someone new to come along to make even bigger promises and to capture your interest even more. You shouldn't wait for someone else to come along, but instead, you should focus on doing things yourself. Focusing on establishing a new system where things like being bound by economic interest aren't a possibility in the first place. I don't know this may sound...
I mean, you make it sound like something's wrong with being quote-unquote bound by economic interests. I mean, this is essential. The economy is basically the attempt to distribute, resources and manage resources. So if the economy is, if in the definition of an economy is managing resources, then we're inevitably bound under any system by the economy. So, I mean, we shouldn't have an issue with being bound by economics at all. This should always be a top priority.
sound completely ridiculous and some kind of fantasy that may never happen, but the thing is, socialism has happened many times, and I've made videos going through this.
Yeah, and it's been shit many times. But, I mean, we can try it again, I guess, right?
So I'll link somewhere if you really do want to watch now. You see, what a lot of Trump supporters and anarcho-capitalists and liberals in general do...
Don't get me started on the anarcho-capitalists. That ideology is idiotic, but I would have a tough time choosing between socialism and anarcho-capitalism, to be honest. And you know what I would do? I would choose neither.
Is they create this ideal version of capitalism, and then they try to kind of jimmy it into the real world, and then...
Well, maybe some people... There are principles within capitalism, but there are actual people like talking about real world situations and stuff. I mean, I agree on the internet and stuff. There are too many people who are talking just about like principles, but I think when you actually do take it down to a real world like example of how capitalism operates and everything, capitalism is still by far the best system. In fact, it actually gets better the more down to earth you get. Socialism is far more about principle, because if you want to talk about like real world capitalism versus real world socialism, then you have to admit that basically every real world socialist country, major country anyways, has completely and utterly failed. And sure, some capitalist countries may have failed, but the majority of the successful countries are capitalist over socialist. So, I mean, in practicality, things don't get better for the socialists in a real world example.
Think of all these different external reasons as to why this perfect form of capitalism isn't matching up with real life. Also,
it sounds to me like you're talking about libertarians, who I don't agree with. Or you may... I know there's a lot of people who are like laissez-faire, you know, completely unregulated economies and stuff. I would consider myself more of a neoliberal, where I'm for regulation and I'm for, you know, safety nets and stuff. But I'm not a progressive. I'm definitely like for individualism and things like that. And I think if you look at Obama's presidency, where, you know, under Bush we had hit this huge recession, and then we had this bailout, and it went into Obama's term, and then we, like, at one point we were hemorrhaging 3 million jobs over 4 months, and we had lost jobs like for 2 straight years basically. And the bailout kicked in, and it turned things around, and we've had like 6 straight years of, you know, straight job growth now. You know, regulation might bring down our top end a little bit, but it also brings up our low end, and regulation prevents a lot of suffering, or I should say intervention prevents a lot, government intervention, it prevents a lot of suffering when things are down.
socialists do is they take the concrete example of what we have as capitalism today and then work from there.
This isn't socialism. This is anti-capitalism. This is why I say you're not actually a socialist, because your top priorities are bashing capitalism. They're not pushing socialism. Like, look at this entire fucking video, just like most of your other videos. You're not really interested in explaining why socialism is so great. You'll bash capitalism almost the entire time, and then you'll say, well, socialism is vaguely good for these principles, and you don't really have a good explanation for how socialism would even operate in a modern society.
That's why the socialist explanation of capitalism is the only right one. It works with the real, what we have right now, instead of some fantasy imagination version of capitalism.
I actually agree with you that um, when we're discussing capitalism, we should discuss, like, I think there's a benefit to discussing principle, but then there's a benefit to saying, okay, well, here's what we actually have. So how can we improve what we have now? But to your surprise, that doesn't mean, potentially to your surprise, that doesn't necessarily mean we have to go to socialism. I think a lot of times it just means capitalist reform. So if there's a lot of times the answer to capitalist failures may be a better type of capitalism. But I would argue that we should have our eye to something grander, and I don't think that's in the form of socialism. I think it's in the form of something we have no idea what it is yet. It's not invented yet. We should invent some sort of better economy. So let's stop talking about old ideas in socialism, and let's start trying to brainstorm new types of economies. And once we find one that's better than capitalism, we can implement it. But right now, I think clearly capitalism is the best economic system we have.
Capitalism, and then trying to think of different reasons as to why we don't have that. For some people like yourself, it might be the globalists. For other people, it might be the capitalists who just don't really care about the people. For other people, it might be the unionists or the people promoting minimum.
Well, part of how there's, among socialists, they have different ideas of socialism. Among capitalists, they have different ideas of capitalism. So, libertarians have their ideas of what capitalism should be, and anarcho-capitalists have their ideas, but that doesn't necessarily line up with the mainstream, so we end up with something more pragmatic, and it's what we have now. I mean, you're acting like what we have now is horrible. What we have now is actually quite good.
Wage, it doesn't matter. There's always one reason as to why this perfect image of capitalism hasn't come into fruition yet. At the end of the day, Trump is a capitalist.
Okay, let's put this in perspective. The US's GDP is equivalent to all of the European Union, including the UK. When the UK leaves the European Union officially, the US's GDP will likely be greater than all of the European Union combined. And those are the top two markets in the world. China doesn't even come close. So just consider that.
He's going to work within his own self-interest, and that is the interest of capital. It's human nature, after all. If you truly want to remedy
the interest of capital, what the fuck does that even mean? Capital doesn't have interest.
The problems of intervention, of poverty, of almost anything really, you need to change the underlying system which is causing these things to happen in the first place. Because things like, as I've said, intervention are an inherent part of capitalism in order to make money for itself. So if you want to get...
What? You're like talking about capitalism as if it's like a person.
Get rid of this, you need to get rid of capitalism. There's no nice version of capitalism that can do this. What I encourage Trump supporters to do is learn. Learn about leftism. Whatever gripe you have about socialism, leave it in the comments. Go to Lefty Poll.
Oh yeah, because clearly the only reason people can be capitalists is because they don't understand socialism. And people, that doesn't apply to socialists though, because socialists can be socialists because they understand capitalism, right? They're not going to, I mean, this is just a ridiculous argument to say that capitalists, or at least to imply that capitalists are capitalists because they don't understand socialism.
Or even to fucking Reddit if you want. I mean, as long as you stay politically correct, they will debate you, they will educate you on the debate subreddit. Just learn, go out there, argue. You'll find that actually you don't really understand a huge amount about socialism, but that's fine, no one does. You can either do...
Well, we're certainly not learning about socialism through your videos, are we?
Do that, or you have the two options of sitting back, waiting for a new candidate to come over, and then they'll fuck you over just as much as Trump has. Or maybe you really are that delusional.
You still have not told me how Trump is fucking me over.
And now this is just 20G chess. I don't fucking know. At the end of the day,
I guess I'm delusional because I would side much more with the Trump is completing 20 or playing 20D chess right now, and I mean, normally I explain it as 4D chess, but he's doing pretty damn well, so maybe it is 20D.
Though, I'll stick by what I've said, that in order to really change society, you need to change the system, not the people. And the only
But, I mean, society is actually pretty good.
other system alternative to capitalism, truly alternative to the fundamental problems of capitalism, is socialism. Not bigger government capitalism, not smaller government.
You just say that, but there's nothing in this video at all that explains why socialism is better than capitalism or how things would improve.
Capitalism, not even some kind of fascism, because fascism at the end of the day is capitalism. So maybe this video just came across as pure rhetoric, and maybe it was, but that's okay, because as socialists we also have the theory to back up this rhetoric.
You have the you have the theory to back up the rhetoric. You know I'm laughing because earlier in your video you complained about socialists or capitalists and their principles and theories and how it's not pragmatic enough, and or that people aren't talking about the real life situation. And now you're like, we have the theory to back up socialist rhetoric. God damn.
Unlike certain other people. I'll leave it to you whether you're interested in learning about genuine alternatives or not. But either way, thanks for watching.
Alright, so I would argue genuine alternatives are not socialism, but something we haven't created yet. So let's put our brains together and try to, figure out the problems of capitalism and come up with a new system to fix those problems and even operate better than it is now. Or we can just, reform capitalism while keeping it capitalist, and that'll be a better form of capitalism and lives will improve. I don't see any evidence in this video that we should go to socialism. That's what I have for you guys tonight, so have a good one.